So this is a civil rights arms race. And what exactly does that mean? I knew about 10 minutes ago before I had to restart this this the camera for some unknown reason. I think that Stephen Miller and Palantir are trying to get into the feed to join the conversation. Didn't know, didn't send any invitations out, but I just had to. So if there were alerts, interruptions, or otherwise beforehand, I my sincere apologies. Civil rights arm. This was spending so much time with spiritually with Reverend Jackson since we learned of his passing, and just going back through the history of the key players. And this is not going to be an exhaustive survey of all consequential American civil rights leaders in in the modern era. I'm just going to touch on a couple notes that I found interesting when I read more deeply about Reverend Jackson, and just touched with the commitment that these men, not all men, a lot of men, um, made and gave their lives for this fight. We all are aware of the fact of Martin Luther King and his March on Washington. I have a dream. The Memphis, the Lorraine, assassinated by James Earl Ray on April 4, 1968. Um, and this, as I said, this particular, what was a little cracker then, was not at the Lorraine Hotel with with all of those senior leaders, including Reverend Jackson, on that day. But I think of that because I think of the childhood memories, mine, of Memphis, which have been back to Memphis 6 or 8 times over the years, just because Beale Street happens to be there, because it's a fantastic city, and the personal connection that is connected in a way to the civil rights struggle. The Peabody Hotel in in Memphis, not the Lorraine, but the more posh and predominantly whites only Peabody Hotel, was sort of a flashpoint because, in the collective action sense, one of the things that that Reverend Jackson was advocating for with the Peabody and other hotels was saying that, hey, we want to bring one of our conferences here, you know, and that means that if we're going to give you the business for the convention business, then and it's going to be a multiracial crowd, then we want our participants to be able to stay in the same hotel. It's like Jackie Robinson would fight. He was if you don't know, you haven't read about Jackie Robinson, a tremendously inspiring story of a civil rights champion, a brilliant young man, a patriot, a 27 sport athlete from UCLA, and just but fighting for civil rights every step of the way. and he spoke out when he was still playing at a time when the hotels, when they went into certain cities, that there were, the black only hotels, and meaning white hotels that excluded people of color. And Jackie Robinson would fight for that. And the Sheraton Peabody in Memphis with the famous ducks. If you want a silly sort of appendage to serious civil rights matters, this is the hotel where they had a gentleman named Bonaparte who tended to this army of ducks that would be marched in the morning down a red carpet from the pen on the roof into the elevator and travel down into the lobby. And the red carpet would be rolled out for the ducks, not for Vladimir Putin, but for our friends, the ducks. And the ducks would march dutifully through the lobby of the hotel and jump into the fountain and swim their little asses off for the whole day. Probably not paid a fair wage because they're ducks. And then at the end of the day, this gentleman who, again, I'll call Bonaparte, and I had another uh, uh, devastatingly handsome black male friend named Bonaparte. So I might be kind of overlaying the names and screwing it up, but I believe it's true. And the ducks would travel back up and go to their condo on the roof of the hotel, have their dinner, and then whatever they did, smoke a few butts and play a few hands of cards, whatever ducks do at night. But that was right, that was in the center of Memphis, and the hotel's still there today. It was in the '60s. It was a Sheraton, and then various flags, I'm sure. Yeah. So how did I get onto ducks? Yeah, I didn't mean to get off of the main track. So in any case, what uh what stood out, of course, is Martin Luther King Jr. And I'll say by extension because Reverend Jesse Jackson, was part of his team, and they fought for civil rights, observing Dr. King's teachings of nonviolent resistance. Okay. And there were, as you've learned, as you studied as a young person in the United States or otherwise, that there were, of course, groups engaged in the civil rights movement that were opposed, politely mostly, to the nonviolent premise upon which Dr. King's and Reverend Jackson's efforts were predicated on. Right? So, and perfectly fine because there was violence, extreme violence, daily, indignity, prejudice, racism, and worse, visited upon Black Americans every single day. So the fact that certain people were not completely satisfied with a wholly passive approach to fighting for civil rights, it's understandable. And that's why I was, after thinking and giving grace and prayers uh, for Reverend Jackson and on his continued journey, was in the time that we're in now. Is we have a government, we have the Trump administration, the Trump regime, the fascist regime, is by the marching orders that are given to their divisions, the marching orders that are spelled out in Project 2025, and the ones that are weaponized by the Stephen Millers, the Rust Boats, the other more aggressive practitioners of this Project 2025 blueprint for breaking apart our democracy. It includes violence against people of color. That is a component part of it. It is not incidental to, it is a component part of the overall plan because, was it their plan to put 10 bullets in Alex Preddy? I wasn't in anybody's head on that day. I wasn't there on the ground. Was it their intention to put bullets into Renee Good in Minneapolis? I don't I don't know. I would guess that it wasn't a premeditated plan, but just as troubling is creating conditions on the ground where that sort of outcome was inevitable, not possible, not likely, inevitable. Right? So when you turn up, kind of like in the TikTok world, where there are two hands on the dial of TikTok as we go into the election. One is Xi Jinping. Anybody that tries to convince you that control is exclusively in the hands of Larry Ellison and his minions are bullshitting. I mean, there's a UAW group involved in the ownership. Yeah, there are malign actors, including Larry Ellison, and Xi Jinping retains complete control over the entire deal. If he wanted to pull the plug on Larry Ellison et al., Donald Trump, if he got if Xi Jinping decided that he was being screwed and he wanted to re- recapture every element of TikTok for his own purposes, he could do it. If you disagree, I'd love to hear your argument because that's kind of how tech works. Is when you have if you'll excuse the oversimplification, for an overly simple guy. I am not a data scientist, but when you retain the keys to the car, you can reclaim the car. Did they rekey it? There's some pretty clever people involved in it, including Larry Ellison, who's a clever guy who has clever people working for him. Whether or not that includes his son is for you to debate and decide. Um, he could take that back, and that sort of turning the dial is perfectly descriptive of what the Trump administration is doing, weaponizing racial tensions in order to make this fiction of a country being overrun by black and brown people that are stealing your jobs, dear MAGA cult followers, and making your life worse. No, the people that are making your life worse are the people that are stealing the United States government blind, reducing taxes to give to the ultra wealthy to make them more ultra wealthy. And then when this whole little nightmare is over, there will be less. Can I tell you today how much less there will be? I can't tell you that because we're not there yet. We won't know until a full accounting and the litigation involved in that process. There's a lot of discovery that's going to have to go on, and a lot of people that will need to take account. And I understand pardons. I think the most delightful exercise, although it might be an exercise in futility, is the effort by by certain members of Congress to make an amendment to the law regarding pardons to for Congress to sort of, can't say claw back, you can't claw back what you never had, but to take control over a veto over pardons. Because what's a more reasonable argument to, to John and Jane Smith, just average Americans, that even if you are Trump voters and if you're still Trump supporters, then, get thee to a nunnery or a psychiatrist or drink more or whatever, whatever kind of counseling you need some. But let's assume, just for this purpose, you are two good faith, loyal American citizens that voted for Trump because you needed your 401k juiced and you didn't care about the racism and cruelty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What is unreasonable about a law that says the Constitution grants in the president alone the right to pardon people unjustly accused, however you want to phrase it. But unless it is proven by a court of competent jurisdiction, including but not limited to uh, the federal appeals court in X, make a special court assignment for that task, unless determined by a 7-judge panel of appointees from both parties, that it's beyond the preponderance of the evidence that the pardon was given for corrupt purposes, then it can be taken back, and thus exposing that person to liability. I think that that's a freaking fantastic idea. Keep the power to pardon unless you're abusing the power. The only person that has, besides Donald Trump, that's abused the pardon power is John Roberts by the ruling in the case in Trump v. U.S. I would say that's an abuse of the pardon power, like kind of like I was going to make a crude reference that include violence against another human being, so I'm going to say no. Say Red Sox on Yankees violence. Use that as an example. I forget. I'm going to get in trouble somewhere there. How about our profile? Our enduring profiles and courage include Dr. King and Jesse Jackson. And Jesse Jackson didn't need to die in order to be emblematic of what it means to be a courageous American, regardless of race, creed, color, you know, national origin, dot, dot. How about Fred Hampton, right? I was thinking of him, obviously, because he was not he was not affiliated with Jackson in a profound way. They were two proud, charismatic leaders operating in Chicago at a particular time. But Fred was a different guy at a different point in his life with a different MO for battling institutional racism and poverty and hunger and inequality. Right? And he was murdered by the United States government and the government from the great state of Illinois, right? By the state, by Cook County, by the FBI, the feds, in the aforementioned statement. So it's worth, his I mean, the celebration of his life is worth more than a mention on a podcast. It's worth, if you're not intimately familiar with, young, Mr. Hampton's life, then I would suggest you, take a little ride there through, several good books out there, and I can't remember titles because, as you know, I don't read print, certainly in the wild, even if it's really big. Um, but I'll drop. There one particular book that I read years and years ago was written by a civil rights attorney that was involved with Fred Hampton and the movement writ large, um, in Chicago and otherwise during that era. But the connection in my original title that fell out before I was having technical issues, and I think the original title was, or maybe I used this on an earlier post. Yeah, it was probably teasing the Jesse Jackson podcast from yesterday and kind of re resending it with a title that was something like "How Many Rainbows in a Rainbow?" Sounds like one of those tests you take, I guess, like when you're really high, or maybe in grade school, and how many colors in the rainbow, etc. And not all rainbows are created equal. There was, Jesse Jackson working in reverse chronological order. The Rainbow Coalition, Jesse Jackson. I don't know that it was founded in '84 at the time of his first presidential run, but it was at or leading up to that point, right? And was the original rainbow, the use of the rainbow. Jesse started when he left the breadbasket group, as we spoke about yesterday, and wanted to strike out on his own and do his own gig because he had superior contacts in the city of had cultivated superior contacts in Chicago, and felt that on his own that he could, with the Push Coalition, that he could go out there and have greater success, operating separately from the organization that Dr. King left behind in the capable hands of Ralph Abernathy, as we talked about yesterday. But King went on, and he had the Rainbow Push, right? And then it was the Rainbow Coalition. What the original of the Rainbow Coalition, or the derivations of that saying, were with Fred Hampton, right? And that was the social work he was doing in the city of Chicago for not just black and brown people, but like Jesse Jackson, Fred Hampton was advocating on behalf of Latinos and poor whites. I mentioned Appalachian, making a backwards ass connection to your hillbilly elegy, BF, F, F, JD. But Fred was a uh, prodigy. Yeah. So when he was when he was coming up in Chicago, he was recognized as an exceptionally bright young man, and he was uh, you know uh, um, a vocal leader and organizer, even as a young person. He was then brought on board as a senior. Is that a contradiction? I'm going to say it. A senior youth leader, as a as a as a as a youth leader in the NAACP, and he was extremely effective in that capacity. Now, Chicago was, the black population in Chicago, some other northern cities, including Detroit, Cleveland, my birthplace. As far as the migration of Black Americans from the South, but Chicago was the epicenter of that. Right? Excuse me. And that, not coincidentally, is why Dr. King and Jesse Jackson focused their attention on Chicago as far as in the northern um, sphere of influence. That was the epicenter. Right? But throughout his life, and not to kind of like not no spoiler alert. Mr. Hampton was murdered when he was 21 years old. Right? So he packed so much incredible beauty and accomplishment in such a young life. It's remarkable. I was, joking, completely unrelated to this, but I was trading notes in the app here. Somebody had mentioned F. Scott Fitzgerald, who had written Gatsby. I think he finished the manuscript itself when he was 25, 6. So it wasn't published, but that he had finished the manuscript. It makes you feel inferior. I mean, people that do accomplish that much at such a young age, Dr. King as well, are just are miracles. We watch our Olympians, and we support their right, of course, to speak their mind, JD. But this Fred Hampton was a child prodigy, and he would transition, the NAACP and the Black Panther Party. Of course, the BPP was born in Bobby Seale in Oakland, right? And that was where the roots of that movement came from. Um, but at a very at everything at a very young age, I'll stop saying that. I'll try. Is that Fred was appointed the commander of the Black Panther Party, Chicago, at whatever it was, age 19 or 20. And so he was a man of tremendous talents, the ability to motivate people, an amazingly talented communicator. But at the same time, this is J. Edgar Hoover time, right? So he was on the radar of the FBI and the various, they had, the FBI, a 3-letter agency. There were 3, 4, 5-letter groups, and a bunch of them set up for monitoring, Martin Luther King. They were, looking at his trash. Um, and all civil rights leaders of that era, um, Mr. Carmichael, they were opening mail. They were, hacking in phones in those days, right? But I mean, there are wiretaps, but I mean, we didn't have the computers in our pockets. OBV, old man, but they were doing the old school surveillance stuff. And J. Edgar Hoover, who was a brilliant bastard, J.R. Hoover, a lot of weird ass shit. What I I'd wear a dress once in a while if it brought my partner pleasure. I don't think she would be pleased to hear that. All of the crazy shit that you hear about J. Edgar Hoover and all of the terrible things that he did surveilling people like Dr. King and, and spying on Americans. I'm not excusing anything. All I'm saying is that J. Edgar Hoover was good at his job and was an extremely intelligent person, just as, John Wayne Gacy or Jeffrey Dahmer might have been intelligent too. These were bad people that did bad things, and they were fully up in Fred's business from the time he was 17. At a very young age, he came to the attention of the Chicago branch of the bureau, and they had a cooperative agreement with Cook County and the Illinois State Police. Right? And so they had a very good understanding of who this young man was and his tremendous potential. He was an expert organizer. He could get people. He could turn out hundreds of people. With the communication capabilities in those days were inferior to what we have now. But think about the time we were in. JFK at the earlier part of the '60s, but then Dr. King and RFK and all of the tremendous violence was was the FBI and the Cook County sheriffs or the DA was Cook County or the Illinois State Police reasonably concerned about black militants causing disruption? Yeah, I'll let you decide on that. These were people that were fighting for their countrymen, brothers and sisters, but not just in their community, fighting for the oppressed and not doing it like your current president with corrupt intent, right? To make themselves wealthy. That wasn't what they were doing. You know, they were doing they were doing programs to feed children, soup kitchens, food banks, organized opportunities, much like the push, Reverend King's, uh, Reverend Jackson's organization, to force businesses in black and brown communities to employ black and brown people. Come on, you have the pleasure of taking our money and spending it. You know, then you got to help us out. So yeah. Um, then of course he'd done a couple turns as a guest of the city, the county, and the state, and for protest essentially. And the ultimate setup and his murder, I will forget because it just happened to occur on a national holiday, which uh, which is uh, which is my birthday. Yeah, so on December 3, when he was under constant surveillance. He was living in a 4-room apartment with his lady and their soon to be born child, and he was taking precautions, not as many precautions as the security team at BPP would have been happy with. They wanted him to move around more frequently because The apartment that he shared with his family was about a block away from the Black Panther Party headquarters, right? So, what street was it on? Begins with an L or a T? Lorraine? No, Lorraine was the hotel. No. Okay, I'll Chicago. I'll remember in a week, or when I read it right after the show. Yeah, that they were. He was under constant surveillance. He was trying to keep moving, but he also wanted normalcy. He had a very pregnant partner, and he got home and he would entertain members of their group at his home after meetings at the headquarters, which was a reinforced bunker with steel doors because of with bullet holes in it because of prior police interventions. Right? So what there was an insider, a mole working for Cook County that drugged him. And so when he was, entertaining, having something to eat and drink before everybody left, they drugged him so he would be more compliant when they stormed his home later, which they did on I guess, early on the morning of the December 4th, and they killed him, and they killed another young man, younger than he, named Clark, um, who was, I think, about 18, and gunned him down in the house. And they were unarmed. And but it's safe to assume that part of their plan, Project 2025, was to eliminate some of these more. I use the term militant only to differentiate between the approach of BPP, because Black Panther Party various chapters are titled purposefully Black Panther Party for common defense, civil defense, community defense, mutual defense. There are different um, adjuncts added to the end of the title of the organization, indicating that we are here. Power to the people, right? And if you are an Instagram person, you will see the BPP Philly branch responding to threats from your national government to come to Philadelphia to pull the same shit that they did in Chicago and Minneapolis in Philly. And the BPP, one of the characteristics and organizing principles of the group is that they are armed legally. You know, there was a major court case in California back in the day, and that was with Huey Newton and the original BPP that uh, to state governments and state police in California were nervous about armed black militants. So you can process that any way you want. But when you're under armed assault, it sounds pretty much like the American way, right? Patriots in a different context, and with a heavily armed with heavily armed government troops who have an inferior training regiment when compared to the Black Panther Party, and that's in dispute. You know, they are rushed onto the quote unquote battlefield, right, in order to do the bidding of the fascist regime. and they're going to rush in and cause disturbances. But what of civil militias armed legally that are there to defend their community? Now, rewind that entire discussion back to Genesis. You know, but for the Trump administration's antagonistic behavior in LA, in Chicago, in Minneapolis, Charlotte, elsewhere, but for that behavior, the intentional disruption, but for, you would not need to have a community patrol. Now, you're saying in certain, yeah, in certain dense urban areas in our country, black, white, or otherwise, are there incidents of crime in any urban areas in the United States? Yes, of course. San Francisco, all of the, the the vitriol that came at the city of, yeah, of course, there's a homeless problem. If there's homeless encampments, will there be violence in homeless encampments? Violence of members of the encampment upon other members? Yes, in extreme circumstances. In extremis, we're humans. Things happen. Just like densely populated urban areas where people are under assault by their government, who are taking away food assistance for their children, repeating racist statements aimed at injuring and instigating violence. Will there be instances of violence? Will they be successful? Yes. That's their plan. That's what they do. That's, if you'll excuse me, how they roll. That's your Trump administration. That is their plan, not incident to. Not they just they're not just driving by and checking in on all cities across the country, regardless of demographic construction. That isn't what's happening. They're targeting dense, urban, black and brown cities, preferably to the Trump administration, where there is a Republican governor, because they can play games with the National Guard and the predicates insurrection acts and everything else. But they're targeting, you know, black and brown and Asian and LGBTQ mayors in blue cities, clearly, because there there ain't no coincidences. That you've heard of AI. No, it's not a coincidence. It's not paranoia. It's not the nobody needs to wave the idiot flag and scream, you know, uh, TDS, right? No, you don't have to. You can, but people already know. You know, if you've been saying it already, people know who you are. They already know where you come from. That's it's kind of one of those. I won't say ESG. That's the longer conversation about Trump letting off the oil and gas industries, letting them pillage the country for his personal benefit. But certainly for DEI, she's a DEI hire. That Kamala Harris, DEI hire. That's the only way she got to be senator. Only way she got to be the DA, DEI hire, right? So those the filthy MAGA Republicans and my poor accent of those that live below the Mason-Dixon line is unfortunate because it's a horrible accident and it's a horrible attempt. And I don't mean to stigmatize just people that live in red southern states, unless they deserve to be stigmatized, in which case, have a nice day. Yeah. So I guess I would close by saying Fred Hampton is often not remembered with the same reverence, and I didn't use that word intentionally, well, unfairly bunching him in together with to actual reverence, right? But he isn't. Perhaps he's not held in the same esteem as MLK, but who is, and Jesse Jackson. Yeah, he's not even in the ground yet, right? So, but he's been gone now. 2, 56 years. He was murdered 56 years ago, right? Give it a look. Like I said, I'll drop the title somewhere on the feed whenever I post this. Meaning after the dog is walked. Um, the That one book that I read a while back about him, and it's a wider, it's a it's a it's a nonfiction account, but it's sort of the lawyer talking about the civil rights movement and Fred Hampton's his place in the movement, which is helpful. Context is everything, and placing him in the midst of so many, Mr. Carmichael, right? The two gentlemen I mentioned from the BPP in Oakland, right? And who else we can throw into the same? Well, excuse me, please, Malcolm X, right? That right in that basket of consequential leaders who you would certainly not say that Malcolm X was more of the MLK Jesse Jackson school. He was he was certainly in favor of a more muscular approach to civil rights. Right? Um, but we can. Well, that probably means that Malcolm X, as if Spike Lee can't do it better than I can, as if Denzel can't do it better than I can. But certainly deserving of his own pod, and that'll happen at some point in the future. Maybe soon, maybe on his birthday, or maybe later. In any case, it is a pleasure as always. Uh, Fred Hampton, I'll post the book, but you can you get you've heard about the interwebs. The stories are pretty amazing as how he came to the movement at such a young age, inspired certainly by Dr. King, and perhaps to a lesser extent, uh, Reverend Jackson. But he knew that, in the NAACP was not advocating violence, but he knew at a very young age that the table stakes, the field upon which this fight was going to be played out were not for the faint of heart, not for timid people. And he was not that. He was brave and aggressive, and and the United States of America and the city of Chicago was was better for having him, if only for a very short period of time. So, Fred Hampton, a good evening, and thank you all very, very much. Have a great night.